about an important development in the future of Flint and its drinking water. Mayor Karen Weaver said she wants Flint to return to a long-term agreement with the Detroit-based Great Lakes Water Authority, which reverses the plans to connect Flint to the new competing Carignan Water Authority, the KWA. Meanwhile, as we approach the 3-year anniversary of the water switch, legislators in Lansing have passed just one policy reform. Well, here now is Flint's Democratic State Senator, the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Jim Ananich. Welcome to Stateside.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to actually see you in person. We talk so often, and you're always on the run. We're always catching you, in Lansing or somewhere around. You're busy. It's wonderful to actually meet you in person. So thank you for taking time to be with us.
Thank you for coming here to Flint. Really appreciate it.
So what were your thoughts about Mayor Weaver's recommendation?
The recommendation is still pretty fresh, and a lot of folks are kind of digesting all the information, and I saw it at the same time the citizens did. I think one of the important things to note is that, the citizens of Flint, I think I can speak for most of them, wanted to make sure that we had a long-term, reliable, healthy water source. So that we have that answer, that we have that now. There's some other questions I think still need to be answered. I think a number of questions that I think people have about, we still have the highest, if not the highest, one of the highest rates for our water in the country, and that's something that needs to be addressed. And that's some of the questions that I think a lot of people still have. Are we going to get rate relief? And is this the best deal that we can possibly get for our community? Are we going to have representation on this board that we will be the second biggest customer for? So we'll see if we can get those things answered, and if they're answered to a level that I'm satisfied with, then that's good. If it's not, then I'll take action at the state level.
What is your sense, your gut feel, as you say, it's all very, very early, but do you foresee a way that this arrangement will help get these water bills down?
I hope so. I think I hope that it's definitely an issue that we have to resolve. One, it's just inhumane to expect people to have to choose between, paying their water bill and paying other necessities. I mean, water is a right. Water is it's something that we have to have. It's something that, I live in Flint here with my family, and I know how expensive my water bills are, and it's just my wife and I and my son. So for families that are really struggling to make ends meet, we have to have this answered. So if this can help with that, great. If not, then we'll find other ways to keep addressing that issue.
And at home, are you drinking the water?
No. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I was lied to like everyone else was. So I buy bottled water with fluoride in it for my son, and I use that primarily myself. I have a filter, but I have people look at me in the face at the highest levels of government and lie to me. So I feel like a lot of people in Flint do. There's still a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, a lot of fear that is real and needs to be addressed, because that kind of level of stress, our city is a stressful city, and it shouldn't be. We did nothing wrong, and I think that needs to be acknowledged, and we need to move forward in fixing that.
In the meantime, the legislature has been slow to respond with policy changes that could help prevent something like this from happening, that what happened in this community going elsewhere. What is holding things up in Lansing?
That's a good question. I was asked that last week, and I didn't want to speculate, and I'm having conversations with leaders on both sides. It's a really troubling development, if you think about it. It never should have happened to people of Flint. I live in Flint. My constituents shouldn't have gone through what happened. But if we don't learn from a terrible tragedy, really just shame on them, and shame on anybody who doesn't get these changes, because this can happen. It will happen in other communities if we don't take the proper steps. And some of those steps are, obviously the lead and copper rule has some flaws in it, without question. That's putting it nicely. Michigan should lead the way. We should have the best standards of anywhere in the country, and other people should follow us. And we should start that here in Flint. And to not change that. I've had the bill in place last session. I've had it in place now. We should make sure that every kid is tested on a regular basis to make sure that they're safe. We need to test daycare centers and schools. And I'm sorry, I don't really care what the cost is. That's people's lives. Lead is a neurotoxin that has really damaging results to people. And if we don't, if they're worried about costs, then that's just a ridiculous reason not to make changes.
When you talk to your Republican colleagues, do you get a sense that there is not a sense of urgency?
Oh, without question.
And
yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I've heard it.
What do they say when they challenge? What do they say to you when you challenge them?
Well, we're going to get to it. We're working on it. I'm still, it's still a priority. And there's a point in time where, there's different levels of language and volume of language that I'm willing to use. I'm to the place now where, okay, we're in this through 3 months, and the citizens of Flint are, we're almost 4 years into this thing. We're starting our 4th year. If we don't learn from this, and we've spent hundreds of millions of taxpayers' dollars to help try to solve a problem all across the state, taxpayers from all across the country, and if we don't make changes, then that is one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard of. So I'm going to keep pushing for it. There's a term that it's really offensive, and I would encourage people that are listening to, if they hear their legislator in the House or Senate say it, a term called Flint fatigue. When people say that to me, I say, well, think about what the fatigue is like when you haven't had fresh water for 3 years. I'm sorry that you have to push a button, that's too much for you. Well, you shouldn't have put policies in place like the emergency manager law that took our democracy away and stripped us of our rights, and then wondered why, and now want to walk away from your mistakes. This was avoidable, 100% avoidable, and we can avoid it for the rest of the state, and we should.
And I know you're working on efforts, as you mentioned, to lower the lead action level, to make Flint a promise zone, create a Water Resources Commission, reestablish the Childhood Lead Commission. Are any of these gaining traction in the legislature?
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to keep pushing, and I'm not somebody who takes no very lightly. I've been able to be successful in Lansing because I just keep, I'm like that little dog in the cartoon. I just keep nipping at their heels until we do it. And we're very fortunate, and I think he's coming up later. I didn't see him yet, but we have a very dynamic school leader in our community, superintendent, and I think we're going to get some traction on the Flint Promise Zone, which I think will help stabilize our schools. As was in the previous clip by Steve Carmody, it's not just the water, it's not just the residents, it's not just the children, it's not just the seniors, it's everything in Flint. It's our schools, it's our property taxes, and we need to stabilize. And I think one of the things that people get mixed up about promise zones is that we are capturing the growth on our own tax dollars. So we're saying we can raise the money. We want to make sure we have a vibrant school system, and if people play by the rules and graduate, they can have a portion or all of their school paid for. This is us coming together saying we can do this, and we have a great team working on it, and I think we're going to get that bill passed very shortly.
Your thoughts about the state's emergency manager law. In particular, I'm wondering, do you think this disaster stemmed from the law or from the people who were chosen to be Flint's emergency manager?
I think a little bit of both. I think when you write a law and that basically strips people of all their voice. They have no say in their government. The Founding Fathers, we fought a revolution because of that. That idea was right then, it's still right now. There has to be voice, there has to be participation, and a part of it's also the people that came in. We were kind of given people that weren't that great, weren't very successful in their own right, and then also a bad law in the first place. And then there was also a number of folks at the state level in various departments that either had the information and didn't tell people, hid the information, or outright lied. So it was a failure from top to bottom, but the emergency manager law being repealed would go a long way, I think, to helping make sure this doesn't happen again.
You were a high school social studies teacher, and then a Flint City Council member and a member of the State House on the State Senate. What lessons about public service and politics would you teach your high school students based on what you've learned from your years in politics during this really unusually dramatic period, even for Michigan in our history?
I'd probably be more of a cynical teacher now than I was when I started, because I try to teach about the principles and the things that we all learn in school. I probably would teach a lot more, because I'm a pretty direct, and you've met me before. I don't like to sugarcoat things. No. I would teach people about the way it really is, and I think that people would, I think students would have their eyes opened up, and I think a lot of people in Michigan already do have their eyes opened up, and I hope more see the failings we have in our state and federal government.
When you realize that what Mayor Weaver recommended over this past week takes Flint and his residents right back in this great big sad circle to where it all started, and you think that it was April 16th, 2013, almost 4 years exactly, when Emergency Manager Ed Kurtz signed that contract that switched the city from Detroit Water to the KWA. What are your feelings as you just think about the irony of all of this and everything that's happened to people in this city?
Yeah, it's really, a lot of decisions get made, and I live here, and Representative Neely lives here, and others from here, and we try to share that, we try to channel the voice. I think that's sometimes why we're angry when we're talking about it, because we feel the anger when we're home, and we have it ourselves. A lot of decisions are being made for the people of Flint, not listening to what they want. And I think that's continuation of the problems and the fears and the frustration people had. So it's, it's really, when you look back, for myself, my family, and my constituents, this has been a pretty terrible experience for us. And a lot of us, residents and other folks, were raising our hands saying, there's something wrong here. And to basically go, we're kind of going full circle when obviously the rates, I think sometimes people forget that the rates were extremely high, and Detroit had a sort of over the barrel, and I think a lot of folks were looking for answers. To get us a long-term water source is good. Now we have to make sure that people can afford it.
Senator Jim Ananich, what a pleasure to have you with us tonight.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
And we've got